It's no surprise to anyone that the US has been in a downward slope, and it's been, a slow and steady pace onto a terminal decline. Now, it's led many to believe that a new American Civil War is on the way, and many are thinking it's the election that could kick it off. Now, depending on who finally wins the White House once the dust settles, but do you really think whoever wins the White House is enough to get the U.S. fighting amongst themselves? Many want to blame Trump because, he says mean things. Some want to blame Biden because he wants to push us to socialism. But I believe it's much deeper and not understood. Hey everyone, Mark here, and we just had one of the most heated elections I can remember. And it's going to take some time for the dust to settle on this one and find out who wins. But as heated as this election was, it definitely wasn't the most heated election we have ever said. I would say that award goes to the election of the 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Now, the election of Abraham Lincoln is considered to be one of the most crucial elections in the entire history of the United States. Abraham Lincoln was running as a Republican. He was pitted against Stephen Douglas, who was the representative for the Democratic Party. But the most unusual aspect of this presidential election was that the Southern Democrats didn't want their side to win. Their goal was to leave the Union, and they wanted to do so in a peaceful manner. But immediately after the results of the election, and of course Lincoln's victory, legislators of South Carolina arranged political meetings and started to talk about the succession, about the breakup. Now, the election of Abraham Lincoln is considered to be one of the major events that led to the start of the Civil War back in 1861, and most people believe that it happened due to slavery. And that was definitely one of the core issues, but it was actually the economy of slavery that was the major controversy in this dispute. Now, again, today in the US, there's talks of another civil war, and they've started to gain some momentum. The left and the right, they both seem so far apart, they're fighting over almost every single aspect and detail of our lives. Now, we've seen lots of different narratives pushed forward: capitalism versus socialism, globalism versus nationalism. We have cancel culture, we have censorship, we have attack on free speech, systemic racism. And there's people just saying mean things about people, right? And many have projected that the final outcome of this whole thing, including the presidential election, will be the fuse that finally kicks all this off. But I say not so fast, because I believe there's something much, much deeper. And I believe it's been going on for a really long time, and it actually shares the same underlying problems as the first Civil War. Now, the most dangerous element in the mix, according to Turchin and George Mason University sociologist Jack Goldstein, is, quote, the corrosive effect of inequality on society. I believe they have created a model that explains how inequality escalates and leads to political instability. And they say it's worsened by elites who monopolize economic gains and narrow the path to social mobility and resist taxation. Inequality ends up undermining state institutions while fomenting distrust and resentment. Now, they go on to state that revolutions tend to follow periods of population growth and urbanization. Turchin also has developed a statistic called the Political Stress Indicator, or what he calls the PSI. And it basically incorporates measures of wage stagnation, national debt, competition between elites, distrust in government, urbanization, and the structure of the population. So basically what they're saying is all of the culture war BS is just surface stuff, right? That's what they're basically saying. And it's basically only covering up for a profound economic insecurity that's actually been building for decades. And it can all really be summed up in one chart, as you can see it up on the screen right now. Now, if you take a look at the average family income, excluding capital gains and adjusted for inflation, you can see that between 2002 to 2012, it's clear that 90% of these families experienced an actual decline in real income, and another 5% experienced hardly any gains at all. So Turchin raised warning signs of a coming storm a decade ago, predicting that instability would peak in the years around 2020. And he seems to be right. He said, quote, in the United States, we have stagnating or declining real wages, a growing gap between rich and poor, an overproduction of young graduates with advanced degrees, and exploding debt. Seems like he got it about right. He went on to say, historically, such developments have served as leading indicators of looming political instability. Again, it seems like he's got it right. But the thing is, we have to place blame where blame belongs, and that's right at the feet of the Federal Reserve, all right? The Fed's monetary policies, they failed to boost the real incomes of most people and have had an enormously favorable impact on just the top 1%, or, of course, the 1% as they're commonly referred to. In fact, I would argue that the Fed is fully responsible for the fact that 90% of U.S. families have had declining real incomes when adjusted for inflation over the last 10 years. Now, as we've seen, money printing raises the prices of our most needed goods and services, such as energy, food, education, transportation, healthcare, insurance, and more. And Americans have also experienced a decline in their net worth. Now, after all, it's the Fed that repeatedly and deliberately creates the bubbles. And more bubbles, and more bubbles, which, of course, they benefit the small top minority, but it hurts the majority in the middle and the bottom. Now, the problem is very few people understand this. They know the system is broken. They know the game is rigged against them. So, of course, they're looking for answers. And so they're looking at culture wars. They're looking at race wars. They're looking at gender wars. They're looking at rich versus poor. And they can't quite put their finger on it. But they take to the streets and protest anyway, demanding some sort of change. But they don't know what kind of change they want. Now, over a dozen years ago, we saw the same outrage after the 2008 great financial crash. We saw people take to the streets, similar to today. Only that time, we saw the groups kind of divide into two different groups, two different factions. We had the Tea Party movement over here. We had the Occupy Wall Street over here. And as you can see on the screen, there's a diagram of how these two factions actually overlapped. Now, the Occupy Wall Street crowd was upset and mad that the corporations had too much power, and the Tea Party crowd was upset that the government had too much power. Now, both of them were mad about the same problem. But the thing is, they were both missing the real reason for the anger, which was actually a combination of both. So as you can see, the two different groups, they have more in common than either side is willing to admit. The problem is actually the large corporations using their money, power, and influence to lobby the government to give them even more money and power and influence. Now, big governments does this by creating more laws and more regulations that favor the large corporations and hurt the free markets. And so far, the power elites have continued to exercise a brilliant divide and rule strategy to maintain their power. They've been able to successfully divert the masses' attention away from the systematic destruction of the middle class and towards, basically anyone or anyone else that they can put the attention on. As long as people are fighting over white privilege, or gender-neutral pronouns, or whatever the mean thing that the president tweeted, right? Whatever they can do then, to distract them, then there's no threat to the establishment. Now, back to what Turchin said, he said that the most dangerous element in the mix is the corrosive effect of inequality on society. All right? He's nailing it right there, and that's what people are missing. It falls all the way back to the money. It falls back to the economy, which is exactly what led to the Civil War. And the pandemic isn't making matters any better. It should come as no surprise that the unrest has grown during the pandemic, and the amount of Americans living in poverty has also grown, as they've been hit hard by the recession, which has further widened the gulf between rich and poor. But there is hope, all right? The U.S. has pulled back from the brink of chaos before. Back in the 1930s, as parts of Europe slid into fascism, the U.S. went in a different direction. And today, we have a renewed interest in politics, in money, in finance. We have new technology that allows us to build and store wealth outside the system, allows us to run things in a trustless, decentralized way. And it's through this knowledge and education, the broken money leading to a broken society, that's going to cause Americans to rise up and demand a sound and just money again. Now, let me know what you think. Are you encouraged by the renewed interest in politics, finance, and money, and where it's going to lead us? Do you think it's going to lead us to a better tomorrow? Let me know in the comments down below. Of course, as always, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. If you don't like the video, give me some thumbs down either way, but leave me a comment and let me know what you think. And that's all I got for you today. To your success, I'm out.